So first of all, I wanted to give a brief introduction about rubrics, especially for the newest faculty that joined us in the last couple of years. So the rubric is really a scoring tool that helps us identify the criteria that are relevant to either an assignment, a learning outcome, and then explicitly state the possible levels of achievement. And we're going to see some examples. And we can use rubrics to assess basically any type of student work, from homework to exams, quizzes, reports. And we can also assess entire programs using rubrics. So we use, for example, rubrics for ABET assessments for my program as well. So rubrics can be set up in different ways. And I've listed the two types of rubrics that I've used in the past. There are a lot of resources at this link here at the bottom, in which it shows you many different types of rubrics and the advantages and disadvantages that each rubric has. We have the traditional rubric, and before going through advantages and disadvantages, I wanted to show you an example. And this example is from Dr. Mortos. It's the oral presentation rubric that we have used for several years in my department to evaluate students' presentation. So you see, in this case, we have divided all our criteria in different groups. We have the technical content group, the organization of the presentation, presentation skills, and then we have verbal communication, and so on and so forth. And for each of them, we have a criteria. And then we rate each student based on the criteria that they met. So for example, if a presentation included some of the pertinent technical information, but left out several important pieces, but it was all correct, we would give them either 5 or 6 points for the technical content, and then there is a scaling factor. So it gives very specific criteria on how to rate each student on the important parts of their work. And the levels of performances are really explicitly set, and these criteria provide useful feedback on the areas of strength and weaknesses to the students. And as you saw in our rubric, you can also weight each criteria to reflect the relative importance of each performance. Some of the disadvantages, I would say the most disadvantage is that it really takes a long time to put together good rubrics with all these criteria and identify each level of performance. And then unless you are really specific and clarify really well each point for each criterion, then the raters, you might not have a consistent grading between different classes, between different professors, and even between different TAs, for example, if you have multiple TAs. So in the last couple of years, I've looked for more straightforward rubrics that allow me to grade things in a faster way, and that are a little bit more clear, and that I can use for any type of assignment that I assign to my students. And I did that through a specification grading professional development that I did with Aileen and Mahima as well. And this specification grading type of rubric are more of a checklist. And I'll show you an example that I use for my class. This is a quiz from the beginning of the semester. I assigned the problem. And you see that I have a criteria basically for each main step of the problem. So this is a statics type of problem. And I have the first criteria is all applied forces and reaction forces are well represented and labeled in the free body diagram. At most one force is missing. And then similar criteria build up the entire problem until the last one, in which I evaluate units. And for each of these criteria, I need to decide only a binary. I need to perform only a binary decision. So I need to decide whether each criteria is passed or not passed. And ME stands for meet expectation, which is passing, and R stands for needs revision, which is not passing. So I look at the solutions and then decide whether the free body diagram has more than one error in this case, and I decide that it's a passing. If not, it's a non-passing. And then if students meet 5 out of 6 of these criteria, they will pass this quiz. Okay, if not, they'll have to retake it. There is a caveat for this quiz. For example, I have these criteria that are deemed E, which for me it's essential, which means that students need to do well and pass all of these 4 criteria. So students need to be able to do a free body diagram for these type of problems. Otherwise, they're automatically not passing the quiz, even if everything else is correct. And I found that these type of rubrics are very easy to use. They are very clear to the students. They know what to expect. They're very simple and fast when I grade, and it really provides consistent grading because I define what a passing is, let's say 1 error, 2 errors, and then it's really straightforward to decide which criteria is met and which criteria needs to pass. It also eliminates many conversations that I previously had with students regarding points. Why did you give me 5 instead of a 6? Instead, here it's a passing or not passing, and students know what to expect. I usually share the rubrics beforehand. This year, I decided to share the rubrics even on the quiz so that students can actually check whether they're doing their work. Some of the disadvantages that sometimes identifying each of these criteria might be difficult, especially for short problems. And it's also difficult to decide when is a passing and when it is not passing, right? So why did I pick 1 force is missing for that force criteria and not 2 and not 0? So it takes a little bit of practice and revision to make sure that the rubrics are well aligned. And this is another example from one of my classes. This is a different type of quiz in which we have distributed loads. And so I define each of the criteria based on my solution, and then based on how much the students, based on their work, I decide whether they're passing or not passing. And in the last 2 years, I've implemented this type of rubrics for really any type of student work that my students need to do, whether it's a short quiz as this one, homework, final exams, and also reports that they submit, like lab reports. I also use this activity, the rubrics also sometimes as an active learning activity in which I ask students to come up with the rubric based on a problem. So I give a problem, without a rubric, we solve it, or the students solve it. And then I say, okay, based on your solution and what we have been doing, what could be a good rubric? What are each criteria and what defines passing and not passing? And I found it very helpful because it helps students break down the procedure and remember it. They were really engaged, and I had really positive discussions about grading with the students. What does it mean to be passing or not passing? And students were really enjoyed that conversation, being able to have a conversation about their grades. And they were in general stricter than I was in terms of defining the grading criteria. So I was surprised that they were the one defining very strict criteria, and I had to be more lenient in their discussion and looking at all different perspectives. Using rubrics is also very straightforward to set up in Canvas, and we've had previous seminars last year, I believe, in which Baf showed us how to import rubrics from an Excel file into Canvas, which is very handy. And there is a detailed link in Aileen's list of resources that she showed us in the first slide, and I repeated the link here, in which it shows you how to basically download a script that allows you to import in Canvas Excel rubrics created in Excel. Creating rubrics directly in Canvas is not the most user-friendly procedure, and so it's really handy to be able to change them and tweak them with Excel and then just uploading your final version. And I also wanted to show you how I use them in Canvas. And I think this is the page. So I create the rubrics that I import in my rubrics page in Canvas. And this is the list of the rubrics. This is a trial class. It's not my actual class. So I have a few rubrics that I had been working on, and I have defined all the criteria. So for example, in this case, this is an ABET type of rubric. I've uploaded it on Canvas with Excel, made sure everything looked good. And then I can go on my assignments and you can create your assignment as you like it, and then you can add the rubric. And you can look for the rubrics in any of the classes you have in Canvas. And I'm the associate chair, so I have a lot of classes in my list of Canvas. And let's say this one is the class I'm working on. And so this was the rubric I showed you. And then I decide to use it. And you see, so now it's associated with the assignment, and the students can actually see it. And then when you go in Speed Grade, on Speed Grader, you can look at the rubric and quickly decide which criteria is passed or not passed. And at the end, you decide whether the number of points is sufficient for passing or not passing. And so the students have an immediate feedback, and it's really handy for me as well to keep track of what are the criteria that were met and which one was not met. And you can customize these rubrics as much as you want. So you have complete freedom on setting up this rubric. And I think that's everything I wanted to show you today.